guys, welcome to my new channel. Here, instead of creating something new, I want to create some conversation. So here about a week ago, I watched The Dark Crystal, The Age of Resistance. I got about 3 episodes in before I started Googling reviews, and I found out in those reviews that the critics weren't being as harsh as I was. And being such a huge fan of Jim Henson, the Muppets mean the world to me. I found that at the end of Age of Resistance, I was being much harsher than I really should have been. Instead of just enjoying the moment and this new experience, I was being very, very critical. So, I put together 13 reasons why The Dark Crystal, the movie, is different from The Dark Crystal, Age of Resistance. Alright, number 1. We're gonna start off with something kind of light here, but it is something that just got me, just on the inside, it got me going. FizzGig versus FizzGigs. So, in the movie, at the end in the credits, it clearly states Jen, a gelfling, puppeteered by Jim Henson. We have Kira, a gelfling, puppeteered by Catherine Mullen. Agra, a keeper of secrets, we'll come back to that, Frank Oz. FizzGig, a friendly monster, puppeteered by Dave Goelz? Is that how you say that, Goelz? It looks like it's Goelz. So I think that is enough proof to wrap that one up, that FizzGig is a name. It's like Domino is Domino, me, I'm DIZ, FizzGig is FizzGig, nuts. They're not all FizzGigs. They one. That was Kira's pet. Number 2. Now this one is a huge spoiler, so if you haven't seen the TV show, I really don't want to ruin this part of that experience for you. So, I mean, if you want it ruined for you, here we go. The General dies. How can, if it's a prequel, how can the General die when the General is very clearly alive and becomes the Emperor? I mean, he has such a huge role. I would be less pissed if like and scratch that. If like, I don't know, the Treasurer died. The Slave Master. I can't even tell which ones specifically those guys even are. So if those guys died, I'd be okay with that. But the General? How? How does the movie even make sense now if you're gonna kill the General off? Yeah. Anyhow, the General in the TV show gets stabbed. And if I'm ruining things for you, I'm just not gonna tell you the details. But he gets stabbed and then he turns to dust. In the movie, we saw this happen. We saw the Emperor turn to dust as well. Which, if somehow a Skeksis can come back from being turned to dust, then why didn't they do that in the movie when the Emperor died? Number 3, the Skeksis count. So, just dive right in, aren't ya? Just diving in. Alright, so the Skeksis count. I spent a lot of time clicking back and through the movie and the TV show trying to figure out which Skeksis was which, so you don't have to. You're welcome. In the credits, we see Chamberlain, the General, High Priest, Dying Emperor. They were voiced by the same person, but they were 2 different characters. The Scientist, Gorman, the Ornamentalist, the Historian, the Slave Master, and Treasurer. So the Historian, the Slave Master, and the Treasurer are the ones that I didn't figure out who exactly they were, but they are named. That gives us 10. The TV show starts us out telling us that 18 Skeks landed on Thra. So we know we have 18 Skeksis to play with, but I personally find that as a bit of a waste. I mean, they could have brought more Skeks to Thra and then have some really cool Skeksis death on death, battle action, Gelfling Skeksis, blood guts. Instead, we only get 18, which is fine, except for I was having trouble figuring out where the other ones were. Here. So we get a shot of them all eating, right? And in that shot we have the Historian, then the Ornamentalist, Chamberlain, the Emperor, the High Priest, Gorman, the General, and Skeklak, the snotty-nosed one, that really nasty with the... I think I might need therapy after watching that scene. It was quite intense. Are you really getting this excited about? Are we this excited about Skeksis? Well, she really did get that excited about Skeksis. So back to the Skeksis count from the movie. While they're all sitting there eating, they state that the scientist is still locked away for unknown spoiler reasons. That leaves us two unaccounted for Skeksis from the TV show. We have the Slave Master and the Treasurer. That's not saying that they won't come into later seasons, they just were never accounted for in this season, which I can appreciate because they did leave a lot of unaccounted for. We didn't get to meet hardly any of the Mystics. So I get it, but we did get to meet the Heretic and the Hunter. The Hunter. Oh, the Hunter. The Hunter, in the credits of the movies, is credited as a Mystic. And never, ever, never have we seen a Mystic have the same name as a Skeksis. So why? Why? So instead of creating a new name for this new character, they decided to take an old Mystic name and use that instead, and then change the Mystic's name to the Archer, because there's no Archer in the movie, to match somehow. I was at a loss. Considering that those characters died, yet we still have an alive Hunter in the movie for the Mystics. I just found it an unnecessary change to a name. I mean, if you're bringing in a new Skeksis and a new Mystic, you can use whatever names you want. Sorry, Wembley. Instead, giving them an old name, I feel like I'm just rambling. Number 4. In the movie, the Skeksis don't know Agra. The Gartham go to her house chasing after Jen. They, instead of catching him, they bag her, tag her, and bring her back to the table. And there she comes out, and none of the Skeksis say her name. They call her Harridan, which means a strict, bossy, belligerent woman. That's not even a sign of respect. But in the TV show, they make Agra this all-mother of Thra. They have her connected to all the animals and give her this rich backstory about how the Unskeks give her the orrery and they trade her for the crystal and the spoilers. It just doesn't make sense to me why you would take such a beloved character like Agra and turn her into this all-mother. I would have liked to see Agra become the good to Chamberlain's bad. Here Chamberlain's whispering all these lies and she comes in with all the secret keeping truth. Like, that would have been epic. I would have loved to seen those two characters kind of duke it out, although it would not have exactly made sense, but it would have at least stuck true to the characters themselves. Number 5, life source versus essence. So in the movie, we see the Skeksis all gathering around the crystal when the suns are lining up just right so that it can beam down that purplish pink beam that goes into the crystal and then beams into all their eyes as they're staring into it. That is them sucking life force out of the crystal. That's how they have maintained to live so long, is by that life source. So the essence is not the same. Essence doesn't make them live longer, it just makes them feel better. So we get that beautifully done scene, especially for the era when the new emperor, the old general, is drinking the essence of one of the podlings. And we get to see his face being all wrinkly and nasty that it is, and how it just expands out so he looks young again, and his hands get all lotion-y commercial looking, how they're just nice and silky and sexy for a Skeksis. I just said a Skeksis is sexy. Dizzy. They're Muppets, you perv. In the TV show, we see the scientist experimenting on the crystal. And through that experimenting through the crystal, instead of the crystal giving the life source, it's now taking the life source. Which is a neat idea to explain why and how they're pulling the essence out of the Gelflings, but it's not a good idea because it actually doesn't make sense. So how my mind interpreted how this magic crystal was to work was that the crystal, in its pure form, when those suns line up, is able to give life source, because the crystal is actually a conductor of some kind, pulling the life source from the universe and giving it to the Skeksis. but how it was able to pull the life source out of the gelflings and podlings so that the Skeksis could drink it had to do some magical way with it being reflected. I mean, in the movie we get to see the crystal, and then that crystal's being reflected through the mirror, and that is what the gelflings and podlings are staring at and having their life source pulled out through that eye connection. So I'm just curious to see in the TV show how they choose to go about clarifying all of this for me, because to get from the TV show to the movie, we're going to have that crystal fixed so that it can still continue to put life sources into the Skeksis. But I'm betting that this is yet another thing they're just gonna look right on over. Yeah. Alright, so number 6 is the timeline. So in the movie, at the very beginning, it says, 1,000 years ago, the land was green and good until the crystal cracked. That gives us a 1,000-year timeline for this prequel to happen. But instead of sticking with 1,000 years, they try to confuse us with tossing in words like trine, which, by the way, trine has been confirmed by Brian Frode, one of the developers, and J.J. Llewellyn, the author of the books, that a trine is Thrasir. Hold that thought though, because a trine is already a word that's defined as 1/3 of a circle or 120%, but that's just Dizzy being Dizzy, I guess. We'll just go with it. But what I can't just go with is the TV's timeline. So the TV, right in the intro, it says that 1,000 trying to go, the crystal cracked, or however they choose to word that. That gives us a 1,000-year timeline. But if it was 1,000 years before the crystal cracked that this took place, then 1,000 years ago the movie The Crystal Cracked and that took place, that means the two of them are happening at the same time, which that doesn't even make sense because I mean all the gelflings are alive. But then in episode 6 it says 2,000 trying to go, the crystal cracked. So which is it, TV show? Is this happening at the same time as the movie, or is this happening 1,000 years after the movie? Because neither makes sense to me. Number 7, the crystal cracking. So here's something that the movie kind of confused me with. In the movie at the end, the Skeks say, many years ago, in our arrogance and delusion, we shattered the pure crystal and our world was split apart. But Aughra says in her history lesson to Jen, 1,000 years ago, there was a great conjunction. I was there. 3 suns lined up. That's when the crystal cracked. That's when the Skeksis appeared. And the Mystics. But the shard showed a different story. So when Jen is sitting there with the shard clearly shows the white crystal. That dingins my dog. The white crystal with a Skeksis smashing it with like a scythe-looking weapon. Which causes the crystal to crack. So here's where the TV show kind of did things right, except for they kind of turn around and didn't quite do it right. So they have the heretic tell this really, I love the way he does it. I love the part in the show where the puppets are using puppets. That, my friends, is brilliant. But it's kind of confusing all at the same time, which I'm good with that kind of confusing because you just gotta watch it a couple times if you didn't get it the first time. So, to sum it up, what happens is the Skeks land and they trade Aughra for the orrery for the crystal. It's a good old swapperoo. And then they do experiments on the crystal, and that's why they get separated. The crystal's magic separates the Mystics from the Skeksis. And then the Skeksis get mad and stab the crystal, which makes the stories before make sense. I don't fully understand why the TV show didn't just stick with the original prophecy. We have yet to see the original prophecy come to play. And the original prophecy is written on stone. It's not just like written in a pencil. That stuff is carved into a rock with pictures and words that we can't read, but don't worry, Jen reads them to us. And he says, when single shines the triple sun, what was sundered and undone shall be made whole, the two made one by Gelfling hand or else by none. It's so beautiful. Why can't we just use that? Instead, we get this silly story about some dual glaive and some nonsense and some nonsense. What I mean by nonsense there is some beautiful puppetry on puppetry action, and not in the dirty kind of way. It was beautiful. I just wish that they stuck with the original wording there, that they made the focus more on the original prophecy, because I've watched The Dark Crystal so many times in my life. I've watched The Dark Crystal so many times this past week, and I still just get so excited every time I watch it. Jim Henson really knows how to tell me a story, which leads us to number 8, the dual glaive. And since it wasn't in the movie, I see that as a very big difference. That, and I really just like swords, knives, and anything sharp. So, let's talk about this. So we have the dual glaive, right? Two halves that were being kept in two completely different places for 30 trine at least. So you had Rianne's father being the one to stick this, we'll call it the second half, stick the second half in the forge, while the first half was being kept in a walking stick. All right, let's break this down. We have the first half in a walking stick. That means that metal is being surrounded by wood. And even though it kind of looked, because yes, I paused and played and paused and played this to see if there was any kind of lacquer on that wood to be able to preserve that metal inside, because wood likes to hold in some moisture, and that metal will rust against moisture. It won't be able to hold its integrity being kept in wood without some kind of protectant on the actual wood to protect all of it. I mean, we could play it off that that's the side that had the crystal in it, and that's how, stop it. Just, no. The half that had the crystal in it was in the forge, which we'll get to that in a second. So I have my doubts that that first half of the sword would be in as good of condition as it is when it comes out. She just bangs that, and bam, we have this beautiful shiny half of the sword. Then they go into the forge and pull that sword out of the fire, but not really. See, the fire is so far down below, and Rianne even makes a comment about how quite cool it is in there. So that heat that's being kept down in that forge would be bubbling up, except for it'd be dissipating too. I mean, the top, far away from the fire, is not gonna be as hot. That kind of heat kept on metal for 30-ish years could actually possibly keep it so shiny, because it's keeping all of that moisture and contaminants away from the sword. So that might work. Adding in the fact that that is the side that has the shard in it, so we could have some magical business going on there that's actually keeping it all cooler. That, all right, I'm in, but I'm not in with how that mounts together. So we have this part of the first half of the sword, and we have this part of the second half of the sword, and they just together. I'm sorry, I don't believe it. I believe that that's one dead gelfling trying to wield around that dual glaive. I believe the second that sword clanks into that Skexa sword, this part of the sword's hitting them in the head. Like, that's dead gelfling right there. I have a lot of questions about the actual structure of the sword, but it's cool again. I'll give it to you guys there. It looks really sick. Number 9, how crude and violent the show has gotten. And I know, the TV show kind of set it up to be on the dark side, because the TV show's kind of dark. I mean, I remember being a little kid and seeing the Emperor laying there and just and turn to dust. Like, I remember that being so mortifying as a child. Like, that was scary. And I realized that today things aren't scary like the old things aren't as scary as they used to be. But that could be because we're adults, that could be a lot of things. But I just think that the TV show upped the ante on that one and just took it too far. My first big complaint about it was when the scientist is beating the Grunak. That, I'm an adult, and that just made me cringe. Like, seeing the shadow of the blood, and the scene kinda needs to happen, but it doesn't need to happen like that. We get the point. We get it. We don't need to see him demolishing this animal through shadows. I mean, one hit, I got it. He's dead. One hit. That's it. That's all I need. I don't need blood everywhere. I don't need blood splashed on the face of another puppet. It's too far. My next point on that is, I know that we have gotten a little lax, but when the high priest says to the general, I like the ugly one on the end, and the general replies back, but it's so small. And the high priest's response is, it's not about the size, it's about the vigor. That's great. Like, that is priceless. I like it. The kids won't get it. They'll, if they even know what the word vigor means, like, it's perfect. It's perfect. But where you crossed the line with me was all the lip licking. Like, whoa. We just took this innuendo to another level. Like, my last point on the whole cruel and violent part of it was, the other two scenes, the first one had a point to the plot. The second one was just one of those things they like to toss into children's movies that may or may not be appropriate for children to hear. But the last part, I saw it and was like, wait, what? Agra pops out her eye, which we've seen her do before. I'm not crying about that. But she pops out her eye and she sticks it in the ornamentalist bathwater. And then we get this bathwater view of the only female Skeksis. Like, what? Why am I getting an underwater view of the body of a Skeksis? Like, it makes my mind go places that I feel I shouldn't be going. Like, I don't want to think about the Skeksis naked or Skeksis genitalia and bathwater and what. No, movie, you gone too far. All right, so number 10, I have some unanswered questions. Like, why wasn't Kira's race clearly depicted? Jen is probably a Drenchen, maybe a Stonewood, but at least have some idea. Kira has green hair. If Stone in the Wood is such a fierce clan, then why are they scared of Deet when she's pretending to be a monster to free Hup? And I know this one's gonna get a bit deep, but why can't Gelflings dream fast the dream fast? It could be like dream fast fasting, or like dream fast dream fasting. They have the memory of the dream fast with another Gelfling. Why can't they dream fast that? Why does the hunter have extra arms? Where did the skull come from that the hunter's wearing? Is that like a dead skull from a dead Skeksis that he's wearing? Did he like slay one of his fellow Skeksis and be like, that would make the perfect helmet? Or did he like sculpt it out of clay? If the essence of the Gelflings is so important for Thrall's survival in the TV show, then how does the movie exist when there's only 2 of them still alive? And most importantly, on my unanswered questions list, why does Laura sound like Yoda? Number 11, questions that the TV show should have answered, but didn't. How do the bats actually work in the movie? When the crystal cracked, only 1 shard came from the crystal, so you can't tell me that all those bats pots have shards of the crystal in them and that's how the crystal can connect? Is it that all crystals can connect to the big crystal, or how? How does it work out? So when Tabra dies, why does a spider get to live? That spider thing on her face? I mean, they made it very clear that they couldn't separate because they've been together for so long, they couldn't tell where one ends and one begins. So if you can't tell where one ends and one begins, when one dies, shouldn't the other one die? How come Rianne doesn't know how to call a land rider, but the woman who lives in the ground all for but a year of her life knows how to call a land rider? I mean, the first episode we saw his dad riding one. Does that mean that all the land riders are cattled around like horses and in stalls so they don't have to call them? Because we didn't see evidence of any of that. So how come burning the queen doesn't send her back to Thra? I mean, if you're burning her, then she's still being released. How does the Emperor's staff work? I mean, we see him with his staff and it's sucking the darkness out. But how does that work? Is it just as simple as all the crystals are connected? And if so, I mean, we saw a bunch of crystals in the desert. Wouldn't you want to be harvesting those crystals? And I'm a little conflicted about what I feel like is the most important question. Because I mean, the Mystics are my favorite characters and we only got to see 2, so we're the beepity beeper all them, huh? And secondly, how did the spider break the dream fast? Into the dream fast. I mean, in the beginning, it's like the first episode, we see these 2 characters, Rianne and Mira? I think it's Mira. Embracing in this really romantic, kind of creepy, because they're puppets sort of dream fast about how they want to kiss each other and so on and so forth, or they did kiss each other. And then all of a sudden, there's a spider in the dream fast. How? He wasn't even touching him. How did he come through into the dream fast? I mean, it would have made sense if he like moved something and it shook him out of the dream fast. But that's not what happened. I mean, later we get to find out that the spiders have some kind of telekinetic with each other, but not with other things unless they're mounted to their face. Like, how? I should stop while I'm ahead. But hell no. Here we go. Number 12, a list of my complaints. So, I realize some of these are going to come off kind of petty, so go ahead and feel free to yell at me down in the comments about this. But blueberries are blueberries. But you remember in the movie how Jen is just walking around this peaceful, pleasant place, and we see these like, they look like blueberries. And then the TV show tried to take these blueberries and make them like this bad guy. Why are the blueberries the bad guy? Like, what? No, we're not asking questions, we're complaining. I don't like it that the blueberries are bad guys. Next thing. We get this very graphic thing of the Emperor's finger coming off and the pus and the very graphic. The Emperor's not missing either of his pointer fingers and we just watched one of them get popped off. So what do? Hot glue it back on? I realize he's a puppet, but he's supposed to be alive in the show. Why are you washing podlings? For one, if podlings want to be dirty, they should be allowed to be dirty. I mean, they're the cutest creature, debatably, the cutest creature in the whole world. If they want to be dirty, they can be dirty. Although, I don't think they're actually dirty. In the movie, like I replayed it, when they do kind of look kind of grimy, but not like dirt dirty, they just look like they've been partying hard. What's wrong with partying hard? Just because you party hard doesn't mean you rub around in the dirt. Although it was super cute watching that one make a dirt angel. I'll give you that. My last complaint on my list, I have a lot more, but only so many made it to the list, was that a lot of the same plot things happened. And I wanted something new, something fresh, something good, something vibrant, something. And instead, I mean, we got a lot of that. We did, but we still saw Chamberlain chasing after a gelfling. We still saw the scientist fighting with the animals and throwing a grunak into the flames instead of himself. With all the technology and stuff that we have today, you guys obviously made this really beautiful. Why didn't we get to see more of the new and less of that old? I mean, I know the story. I know the story of the Dark Crystal. I know it quite well. I've seen the movie over 100 times, and not exaggerating. I have seen that movie over 100 times. I realize that you guys want to do some shout outs. Not shout outs, but like, you know, kind of bring back that old true nature of the movie, but instead some of it just kind of felt forced instead of a brilliant look back. Which leads me to 13. I want to take a chance to kind of give props to the TV show. I mean, growing up with The Dark Crystal, I have 4 older brothers, and it was one of the few movies we could put on and all agree with instead of fighting over it. They did a beautiful job. I'm so grateful that they decided to use puppets. Muppets. That they decided to use Muppets instead of making it an animated series. That I just can't express that enough. I thank you. It would have been awful no matter how good the plot if they made it an animated series. I mean, the beauty of The Dark Crystal is this world that they created, that Jim created with all of his people of puppets, and the way they moved, the way they acted, the way they did things. It was just so brilliant and so brilliantly brought to life. So to see people put forth that much effort into recreating this world, I appreciate it. Even though I found a lot of things I wasn't liking and things that I just got me to the point I'm making a YouTube video about it. But overall, the look of it is just breathtaking. It is so stunning. I encourage everybody, if you've made it this far in my video, to go ahead and take 10 hours of your life. Trust me, it will not be wasted. Just know, with everything I've told you, the things that are going to be different. Because some things are different, and some things don't exactly make sense. But when you just take a step back, set the movie aside, just enjoy the ride. Like, it's a trip. It is so much fun to see Gelflings brought back and become something new. I mean, it's beautiful. I just can't get over it. Now that I've gone on that rant, I want to jump back, reel it back into the things that they did right. I really appreciate how they showed us the feuding between Chamberlain and the General. I also appreciate seeing the podlings, not sucked out podlings, but servant podlings in the castle. In my head, it wasn't that way, that after they wiped out the Gelflings, that they brought in the podlings and started sucking out their lives. I didn't think that the podlings may have been servants before they got turned into these brainless podlings. The next thing, the way that crystal gets pulled down and so that the scientists can do experiments on it is so exciting for me. The claws coming up and the pulling it down and the chains and the sick. That is so sick. You know what else is sick? That stingray. That was awesome. Just having this big stingray looking thing. That is what they're flying on? We just have this stingray just flying through the air like a plane. And to wrap it all up, the last thing I want to leave you with is that it is worth watching. I mean, it is really different, but it is worth watching. And a lot of people put a lot of time and a lot of hard work into it. And some of this video may have sounded like I didn't appreciate everything that you did. And that is so unbelievably far from the truth. I appreciate everybody that brought Jim Henson's work back to life to give us one more go of the Dark Crystal. And just like I'm thanking all of them, I want to thank all of you. Thank you guys so much for watching, and please go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe, because I will be putting out more content of entertainment, video games, I don't know, whatever kind of mischief I seem to get myself into. Sorry about that, Domino.